we see that they took money from the sewerage in lieu of taxes, but, from the enterprise, but they didn't do that from the water. That leads to a question that has been brought up by the select board about in lieu of taxes, pilot programs, etc. So those are some things that have happened that shouldn't have happened in the process. The documentation's all here. And I'm not gonna take and share this. If you want a copy, I'm willing to give you a copy, but this is something that the advisory board is gonna look at. We're going to take and try to do something with it to help the citizens understand what happened and what we shouldn't do. It's like borrowing money, more money than you have, and spending more money than you have. And that's really the whole premise of what's happened for a number of years. We were spending more money than we were bringing in. Shouldn't happen, shouldn't happen. That being said, let's go on to the actual process and recommendations that we were talking about. Let's talk about, first of all, the first process. You will hand those to the selectmen. The first document I'm going to end up showing you, and by the way, I've tabbed it so that you can see that right away. There's a paper clip, you can go right to that page. This is the municipal calendar. It tells the responsibility of all, the assessor, the collector, over the years and when it should happen. But I really want to point out what should happen in October, because we still have some things that we need to clean up in the actual budgeting process. October, by the end of October, and I'll read this right off the thing, selectmen begin establishing new fiscal year budget guidelines and request department budgets. Okay? November, by the end of November, selectmen or mayor reviews budgets submitted by department heads. This date varies depending on what the dates of the town meeting, but that's pretty much where we should be. In December, again, the selectmen begin to finalize budget recommendations for review by finance committee. Because there was people that said, hey, the finance committee developed the budgets. We didn't develop anything. We were handed off a lot of stuff. We asked for a lot of stuff. And finally, in January, or it should be February, the finance committee continues budget review and develops recommendations. This date depends again on the thing. Later on in the calendar, the advisory board or the finance committee also looks at what's on the warrant. That's the first document that we should reference. The second one that I want to end up giving, and this is the Bible that we went by the Association of Town Finance Committees. And I took one page out of that to take and show you what the guidelines were that we followed. Please note that in October, again, this is begin budget process for the coming year, establish financial guidelines, etc. Selectmen, department heads, finance committee, and school committee. As you saw, that we were pushing it from the advisory board to start that process this year earlier because the last past years have been disastrous. And I just want to go back and say that the finance committee or advisory board shouldn't be doing reviews in April, receive information from town department heads for expenditures in May, and be having a meeting in May a week before annual town meeting on the budget. That's a no-no. That's what happened last year. In October, November, review department budgets, town administrator. We're headed in the right direction. I want to take and end up saying that again. We're headed in the right direction. You guys are headed in the right, again, maybe not in the time frame that we wish, but we're headed there. December, prepare initial review, expenditures projection for coming year, selectmen, department heads, finance, etc. Okay, I mean, I'm going to just breeze through this. Again, February, begin preparation of our budget recommendations, meeting with department heads, finance committee, advisory board. As you notice, it's a handoff. This is not something that, I wanna clarify that, because there were some things at the last selectmen meeting that need to be clarified. That's really the process. March. Prepare final revenue expenditure projections for coming fiscal year in preparation for town meeting. That's the selectmen and the finance committee, advisory board. It shouldn't be an adversarial role, and I don't believe, and I don't want it to be that. I think this is a cooperation thing. We don't necessarily have to agree on some of the numbers, but we have to work together to make sure we have it ready for town meeting. And finally, prepare for town meeting warrant recommendations, finance committee. That's including the budget. Okay, that's another document. I know this is a lot of documentation I'm gonna end up providing you, but if you hand this, and I will read this. This is actually from the Association of Town Finance Committee's handbook that we followed last year, to the best of our ability, okay? We were headed in that direction. And when you all get it, I've highlighted the area that I'm gonna read. This is in paragraph 2. The Board of Selectmen and the town administrator the town manager / administrator, executive session, secretary are part of the executive branch of government. It's their job to collect budget information, develop budget priorities, and formulate a balanced budget, the same as the president and governor. It's not the advisory board. Once developed, the budget is presented to the finance committee, represents the legislative branch, the town meeting. In effect, the local finance committee has the same role as the House Ways and Means in the state legislation. It's the finance committee's responsibility to receive the budget from the executive branch, either as a collective whole or individually by department, analyze it, have hearings where the department heads and the public can testify and present a balanced budget to the town meeting. That's basically what we end up doing. I know you all have this particular book, is the bylaws. I actually went back to, because there was a comment about what the duties are with as far as the advisory board is in here, and what their responsibility is. And we did follow that to the letter of the law. It doesn't say anything in the Article 4, Section 4, that we develop the budget. It says that we can ask for a lot of stuff in the form that we want it to review, and it says that we can go to the department heads and get what we need to make those reviews. It doesn't say we formulate. So, I mean, this is the consistency. Those are the type of things that really, as you saw all those steps, that need to be corrected. I'm bringing them to you as recommendations that we need to correct those. Why have I done that this year? Is that we have gone through this crisis. We need to get better. Last year, one comment was wow, we ended up getting the budget done before town meeting instead of in the middle of town meeting. Yeah, that's true, but that shouldn't happen that way. So I'm trying to push us to end up getting the budget within the process. You can blame that on my background as a process quality engineer. When I had a quality issue in the process, I would look at it, analyze it, see what the process is, make recommendations to management. Well, this is a recommendation to management that I'm making. Here we have a process, we need to follow it. By the way, here's a copy for the board, because at one time I asked the past coordinator for this document, the Association of Town Finances, and the selectmen didn't have it. They put these on CDs. I give this to the chairman for his review.
I gave my record player away.
So those are the steps, and I would like to see us get more towards those. Why? Because last year, when we were even doing budget reviews in April, we didn't have all the budgets. Now, here's the sticker. You guys are on the hook to get the budgets. We don't have a town administrator, as you heard me say. We don't have all the budgets yet. We haven't even got that far. So that's, I'm trying to take it end up, letting you know that ahead of time, so we can get that going and correct that. You guys have to push some of the department heads. We don't have all the budgets. On Wednesday's meeting, we'll be talking about the ones that we have and identifying those that we still don't have. I've had one or two members that said, if a department head can't give us a budget, then he doesn't need it. And these are people that work in industry and management. So, I mean, they're aware of the responsibilities for that. Lastly, I'm going to end up giving you one more thing here before I get into another area. My board has already seen this. This is General Stabilization Fund. This is a document that we are intending on putting on the website. By the way, all the documents that I've talked about
Fine, Joe.
thus far, I'll be presenting to the advisory board to put on the advisory board page so that department heads, select board can see them, and the members of the community can see them, and see what we're really supposed to be doing. It's important that the community know what we're doing. Like you, I believe in transparency. The second page that you have, because I am on the capital planning, we had asked for how much money is in capital stabilization. There was a misnomer that we had $250,000 in stabilization. As you can see from the second page, if you look at all three capital stabilization funds, Pajari, Capital, and General, we only have 124. Capital is capital, Pajari is Pajari, so as far as the General Stabilization Fund, we only have 103,000, a little over 103,000. And I ended up doing a little synopsis on the back of the first sheet, showing you that stabilization, what is actually in the financial policy that the advisory board has had for the last 18 months as a guideline. We weren't that strict enough to know, to end up saying that we could never use any free cash. We were liberal enough that we knew that there was some issues, but we still said, you shouldn't use free cash to balance the budget. But we gave some latitude there and said not more than 20%. And we wanted to hold that for a couple of years so that if we did have a crisis such as this, we had that latitude to use that. The last selectman chose to take, and I came before them, just like I came from you a number of months and made suggestions that you end up looking at the financial policy that they had, and they had it as a goal to look at that and see if you wanted to come on board with us as a policy or still have that as goals for the select board. And I understand, to me, that was a big change right there when I had a select board choose to take it, end up having it as goals. That was the primary thing. I wasn't looking to take it, end up saying, select board, you have to have this as a policy. That was a big step for that last select board, and I understood that. So as you see, the memo actually came from our accountant. I have to give kudos to our accountant and our forensic accountant. But most of all, I had to give kudos to our town coordinator who, working with the last select board and this board, was able to get a forensic accountant to come in here. It took 18 months to take it, end up finding an issue. So if anybody criticizes us for not knowing what was happening in April, I say to them, if it took people that are professionals 18 months to go through what we went through because of past administrations, I'm sorry, that's how convoluted the process was, and it took us that long to recognize what the whole process was. Before I end up going into the second thing about recommendations, is there any questions on that the board would like to take and end up talking about, or whatever?
Yes.
Yes?
This may get into your recommendation category, so if so, you can just ignore me until the end. But I guess my question is, and my largest question, while I understand how we should be doing things and where we should be in the process,
Yeah.
we also should have our books closed out months and months
Yes,
ago.
we totally agree with that,
Right.
because if you look at the process last year, and I didn't say that, I skipped over that because I didn't want to take too much of your time. Mr. Dennis was absolutely right. You cannot end up setting a budget without knowing how much money you can spend.
Right.
That's impossible to do. Well, last year, we just about came to that because of going from this one software that was very proprietary. Only 5 communities had that software. 5 communities. And only one person really understood that, and that was a past accountant. I mean, he even understood the convoluted model that was given to us. With no explanation, he didn't close out our books on 12. So, I mean, those are all facts.
Yep. So,
But, I mean, that's, when you end up posting the revenues and the expenditures, you have to take and end up balancing it so you don't have that negative effect, and you're forced to use free cash and stabilization. Let me say this, and I know that the general feeling might be that this year here, you have to use stabilization and free cash. If you do that as a select board and make that recommendation, I'm not sure that the advisory board is going to end up, if we go to town meeting, recommending going along with that. I want to let you know that up front. Some members have already stated that at the last meeting. Because if we do that, that's just kicking the can to 15. We still have to make those cuts if we have to balance the budget. Because even the 2.5% increase is going to be taken up by increases in the general budget, the general fund budget anyway. And it won't be there, so we're still going to have to make cuts. It pains me to take and end up having to make cuts. That's one of the things that the recommendations, what I'm going to be talking about next is, and I'll get into those recommendations that the first one we're coming to the board with, and also talk about some other ones. I just want to remind folks that when we met on November 6th, we did give you what we thought, what we were going to look at as far as moving things together, consolidating government, and we said we would come back after we've reviewed them in entirety. We did say that. So this is part of what we're doing now. We don't end up just making a decision based upon no data. Look at that. We gather some data, it's presented to the board, all the board looks at the data, and we come to the conclusion. I hope that answers some of
Yeah,
your
well,
questions.
what I was getting at is just looking at the calendar. So with the current, and I know that this applies to fiscal year 14 and not to 15, but it ties in.
Yeah.
So if we voted at our next meeting to hold override vote and a special assuming that our budgets are done in the next
Right.
5 days, not our budgets, but our books. So if we voted at the next meeting to hold an override vote, and we'd have to obviously hold a special town meeting as well, the earliest we'd be able to do that is mid-February. So we'd be looking at about 3.5 months left in the fiscal year to come up with
Right.
whatever
Yes.
shortfall we need to come up with.
We're aware of
so
that.
So my question is, so I just want to confirm, so you were not advocating that we should make those cuts
In entirety.
at this, in this fiscal year, but going forward with the
No,
budget?
we're not saying that. We say, we're actually, we had discussion, we haven't come to an entire conclusion that there should be and you heard me say that 20% of free cash, we got it in our policy, because we, like I said, we anticipated if we did have some issues, that would help. We were probably leaning towards using some free cash and making some cuts to end up blunting that, and knowing that next year, we're still going to have to make some cuts.
Yeah, and the only reason I just want to point that out to make sure is that, because we're talking about, which I know you're aware of, but so everyone is aware of, we're talking about 11%, not of our overall budget, but of our operating budget.
Yeah.
So 11% of our budget is the equivalent of more than a month's worth of the town.
Yes, I
So,
know.
so it would, to make all of those cuts this year would pretty much almost require shutting down the town for at least a month in order to, because we would still have continuing
That is an
obligations to
that is an
pay people
option.
unemployment.
That is an
and whatnot.
option.
Right.
I mean, we have to look at that, we have to end up getting outside the box, so to speak, is looking at all the options to end up seeing how we can get this and move forward as a community. We're still gonna have to make some cuts in 15, even if we were to close down for 1 month. I mean, as a community. Some services, we can't close down. So that's why I'm saying is free cash. I mean, there is no plan right now, as far as I am aware, as to how they can handle this physical crisis.
Oh, right, because we don't even know how much money we have.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
We don't know how much money we have. People are looking for the select board to make that decision. The select board hasn't delegated that to anybody to take a look at that. I'm not sure at what level the select board individually as a group. I know you haven't done that, but individually, whether you've done that. The advisory board has looked at some of that. We knew that if we had to make the cuts all next year, it was going to be 11 to 12%. I mean, when do we want, it really comes down to when do we want to bite the bullet? Because we knew that the 2.5% would end up cutting into how much we actually have as a deficit, okay? Even if we kick the can down the road. But we still have to take and make that level of cuts. Still very painful to all departments. And I mean, I've talked to some department heads, and they're saying, you know, and we went, by the way, we did put a letter out to all the departments, and we went along with the 2% that the select board talked about in December, because we wanted to show that we were on board with you. We're not gonna give a different number than the selectmen. We knew that there had to be a difference here, but we are not gonna end up saying, you're wrong and we're right. We wanna end up showing that we knew that we needed to do something. And then that's the direction that, from our standpoint, that we were hoping to have for both boards. And by the way, as you saw, one of the things that we got, when we did have our joint meeting, which was, we've never done that before, and I want to go back to that, because I've got some people that went, well, we never done that, is have a joint meeting with the selectmen. That's correct. Why didn't the advisory board ask for the school committee? Because it was hard enough for the townspeople to end up seeing two boards, which they'd never seen in the past, get together and talk about the finances, which are supposed to happen. To take and bring somebody else on board was just too much at that particular time. Our intent going forward in the future, if we're still on, is to do that. We need to end up bring everybody to the table, so to speak, so we can end up talking about the finances of the entire community. That doesn't exclude the school, it doesn't exclude the town, and it doesn't exclude everything. The advisory board works for the town. There are some things that the advisory board has made recommendations that some of the advisory board people do not have that service, but we're looking out for the townspeople. I want to make sure that's clear. When we make recommendations, it's not for individuals on our board, it's for the town in its entirety. We represent the voters of this community as a whole. I wish we had more people coming to our meeting, but it doesn't happen. We get more input. But I think we've got some good people on the board now to end up doing that. We have some people that are in business, in management, they have to make hard
Excuse
decisions,
me.
et cetera. Yes.
Excuse me for a second. People either please be quiet or take your conversations outside, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. By the way, one of the things I was gonna say earlier was that when I've come and talked before the board, I patiently waited in other meetings, and I was interrupted, and I was gonna take and talk to them, but I thank you for noticing that and making that change when people are talking, that you recognize that they are speaking and have other people just wait to make their comments. So, is there any other questions as far as the budget process and what should happen and what needs to be corrected? I mean, this is an education process for the town as well as for the board members, that we collectively have to do this. It's not just advisory, it's selectmen also. It's us that are running the community.
No, I mean, as you pointed out here, the process, the timeline, it's all clearly defined.
Yep.
And from, this year to years past, Templeton has just pretty much ignored the time.
the process.
You know,
Simple as it's a
we've done-
management problem.
Right, absolutely.
It's a management problem, and nobody deems that they have to manage it. And it's happening again, we're stretching out again. And to be honest with you, I'm one of the ones that said to Will, if this was my business, I'd give people a deadline. If they don't hit the deadline, they either get what I give them or I zero them out. And if they don't do it, they don't do it.
And there's a man
That's their
that,
job.
there's
I
a
do
man-
this all the time,
there's a man that has 35 employees that report to him directly, okay? Outside of this process. I mean, I rely upon, it's been a number of years, but I rely upon individuals like that can give the feedback. We're lucky we have an individual that will give us that perspective, what's happening.
If I can continue.
Yes,
Um,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're already behind the 8 ball with FY15 budgeting. We're nowhere even near coming to meet this timeline. However, if we have a good town administrator in place in FY15,
No.
if we make cuts and do consolidations in FY15, and this town administrator, we direct them to hold the town to the timeline. The problem now, the reason advisory board doesn't get the budgets, capital planning doesn't get their request, is because there's nobody to hold anybody accountable. So at some point, I would like to make a recommendation that we find out what departments haven't submitted their budget yet, and either the chairman or the coordinator, contact those departments to find out why.
And again, I'll just say that from my perspective, it's very easy for me to vote, to recommend zero budget for them at town meeting. I
And-
know that, something, this is a business. This is a business, and even though it doesn't run completely like a business, you have to treat it that way.
Yeah.
And people have to do their job, and there's too many people that don't take their job, responsibly. They have to do what they're supposed to do. And if they can't do it, then we need to make some changes. I mean, I deal with that all the time. I have high-level engineers that are making 100K plus. And if they're not doing their job, something, I'm gonna find somebody else to replace them. So we need to take that tack. We're in deep crap, We need to take that tack.
Right, and I would agree that, if they don't submit a budget, sure, give them zero. I'm also gonna be a proponent for in FY15, since we are behind the 8 ball in the budget, because we do have this crisis we've gotta look at, that we perhaps limit the departments to budgeting exactly what they know are mandatory expenses. We put the rest of it into emergency reserve, and then if a department gets partway through the year and realizes they're gonna be short, we then have the discussions at that point and have the money in the emergency reserve to fall back on, but not just appropriate it all up front.
Because like I alluded in the past, one year they actually borrowed 300,000. They were taking money from the sewage enterprise. I saw money being taken out of the ambulance fund on a number of years. I mean, this is everything it's documented. The sad part about it is, and I don't want to take it end up saying, it was right in front of the whole community. Why didn't we as a community see this? I don't know, and I don't, at this particular point, I don't care. I want to correct this. I want to get us going in the right direction from the advisory board standpoint. And with the help of the select board, and I think we're headed there, I think we can do this.
Anybody else?
Okay, can I go on to the next, as far as the recommendations, if you have no questions?
Anybody's all set?
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you. You're probably gonna hate me because of all the documentation I'm gonna hand you. By the way, this, like I said, this documentation it's been in front of us. I don't know if the select board, some of the select board members may have known about this document. Maybe they didn't, don't know. But I wanna, I tabbed it to the area in the thing. I give you that, and I'm gonna talk about something first. Keep that aside for now, okay?
Oh, sure. There we go.
Just keep that one aside, if you will, for now. Because I'm gonna be referring to part of it where here I'm gonna end up giving you this here. And just say that during our November 6th meeting, when we did meet jointly, we did say that we were gonna take and end up, advisory board plans of action was to take and end up exploring departments whose hours are reduced, looking at making some recommendations as to identifying operations to consolidate. I just want to remind you that. The next page is a letter from the board. I'm not going to read it. It's so that you all have that. It's based, and I'll just sum it up. Our recommendation is this, for the FY15, and this, we can't do this as an advisory board. This is why we're coming as a recommendation. We reviewed a bunch of documentation, and we looked at two particular functions, the treasurer and collector position. If you look at the data sheets that I have in there, there's over 30 communities that we looked at. Over 75% of them have a treasurer collector as one title with an assistant treasurer collector. And if you look at the salary ranges for that particular position, and you average it out, more than 75 to 80% of them pay the treasurer collector joint position around $50,000 to $55,000. We looked at our budget, per se, and that's why we made the recommendation to have the town choose to combine the two functions and employ a treasurer collector and an assistant to do the job. We even found some communities that had no assistants. So there's some data that how we made our decision to make this recommendation. In the document that I gave you, and I pinned it, this is a guide to financial management for town officials. This spells out what we're all supposed to be doing from each job perspective. But I pinned page 38 because it brings out this same question. Why do some towns combine the position of treasurer collector? The duties and responsibilities of the position of treasurer collector are interrelated. Both involve the movement of town money. State law permits a municipality to combine the positions, and many towns choose to do this. Combining the positions provides some assurance that the operation of both offices will be integrated and well coordinated. And at the very bottom, this is a policy choice for each town to make. Advisory board doesn't doesn't set policy. So that's why we brought this. So you have that as a document to look at. Lastly, this is a community that has more people than we do. And this was actually in the paper, I think today or over the weekend. Rutland, treasurer, collector, and town clerk. One person had all those jobs. Take a look at the picture there. As you see, they had a swinging door, a town clerk on one side, and the treasurer collector on the other side of that counter. So you went to whichever side of the counter you wanted to go to. That's what we've been advocating for some time when we said, let's consolidate town government. When we were advocating this earlier from the advisory board position. This individual, believe it or not, as far as the treasurer collector, you look on the sheet that we gave you, was getting paid for treasurer collector a little over $44,000. I don't know what, I didn't go back and check what they were getting it as town clerk, but I'm sure that this individual is probably getting in $30,000 to $40,000 range. So one individual was able to take and end up party with some help to end up doing the town's business. I think that's good practice when you can consolidate and end up paying somebody to do a good job for you, and they have the experience and the know-how to do the job. For us to take and end up going out and paying under what the going wage is for anyone, we get what we pay for, folks. I'm sorry to say that, but we get what we pay for. We get some inexperienced people, and inexperienced people help cause problems. It happens in business. You've heard that from one of my members. I experienced that too when I was in supervision and management. So that's our recommendation, is that we can't do it. It's a policy thing that the selectmen can choose to do, and in actuality, it would end up consolidating government, and in the long run, I think it would save us money. I'm not talking about getting a town clerk in there too. I'm just talking about treasurer collector as one position with an assistant treasurer collector. The benefits of doing that too is that if you have the treasurer collector, the primary person leave, you have an assistant. You don't have any gaps when they take vacations. That's a benefit there. Right now, if our treasurer's gone, we don't have a treasurer that's, when he's on vacation, we have he has an assistant, but they're not the treasurer. Same thing with the collector. So that's really, in the whole, my whole thing is coming to the board with those as items that what we saw. And again, I want to thank you for giving us at least the opportunity to make this presentation, make these recommendations, and hopefully we can end up making the budget process work much better. We knew that the recap issue, for whatever reason, was not allowed. Those people were either not allowed, they didn't know how, or that those individuals that were in the management of our town didn't let them, don't know, don't care. But that's, if you start splitting up those for the recap, the checks and balances are there. If we start following the budget process, things will work a lot smoother. We won't be going up to the 9th hour. I think by getting the software that we have now, and the accountant and the forensic accountant, they'll be able to take and straighten out the thing. And I want to make sure that at least clarified and as far as how much money we had in stabilization, to show you that it's not like we have a pile of money in general stabilization. And our policy does say that we should aim at the beginning 4 to 7%. At one time, and this is just in passing, this town was sitting on $1.4 million. How do I know that? Because I did the research. I have the research as to how much we had it in stabilization as well as in free cash over the years. Where is it? We're sitting with absolutely nothing because we, as a community, because it's not, I mean, we chose to take it, end up having a budget that we were spending more than we were bringing in. That's not good finances for a community. That's why we're probably in the problem that we have today. Thank you.
Hey, you, any members of the board have any questions?
Any questions? I'm more than willing to try to answer. I don't have all the answers. As you can see, I do a lot of research because it takes the research in order to get the answers. I have the questions, but I don't have the answers.
Yes.
Rather than just assuming that an override isn't possible, just for the sake of worst-case scenario, what I can only ask you as an individual, but in regards to a kind of 3 to 5 year plan where the goal is to have a completely free cash-free budget, free cash-free budget, free cash, non-fund, you know what I mean, in the next let's say 3 years or 5 years.
Yeah.
So we do have to cut that 11% of our budget, but it actually we commit to doing it over a course of 4 years, and between the 2.5% and level funding, we end up maybe only having to cut $50,000 or $60,000 over those years when combined with level funding and 2.5%. Do you think that is too slow of a resolution?
That's too slow of a resolution, because take a look at what we did in going into the 13 budget. We knew we had a problem. Right in the middle of town meeting, there was an emergency meeting. I have to I don't necessarily agree with that chairman on what some of the stuff he did, but he made the right decision to have an emergency meeting in the middle. I was lucky enough to be on the advisory board and had already looked at this and said, we have some issues here. Didn't know exactly what total they were. I came in with a recommendation, and working with that select board, I came in with a recommendation of cutting 103. When they finally did it, they came into 107, 108. If you look at the budget that we came in 14, we actually cut 64,000 out of that to what we thought was level funded, okay? So if you look at that, that's 170,000 out of the budget, and we still, can you imagine if we tap that on top of the 500? Now we're talking about almost $700,000 that we were short, and that's, in some years, if you look back, that's exactly the amount of stabilization and free cash that they were taking either from one or the other to take and make up the deficit. I mean, this is that has to stop. We can't do that. I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, if we do it in smaller steps, is it gonna be less painful? Yes, but it's going to take a longer process, and my personal opinion is you don't do that. You try to get through this and start on the upward curve, because the longer you drag this out, the more pain that you have inflicted on your town employees. If you do it, and then you can call them back, because they need to take and make a living. We can't keep saying, okay, we're gonna take and cut one person this year. Okay, we cut one guy. So next year, we cut 1 or 2 people. It's always gonna be hanging over the head. And I know how that was, because I worked for a computer company that I sat there for 5 years and didn't know. They talked about cuts, and if I was gonna be the one. That's not good. That's not good for the employees. I mean, I wanna give you that perspective of what I went through. I don't want that to happen to our employees. They need to take and end up knowing right up front. I know that there's questions from the police department to me, from the chief, and we had some level of discussion, and he's looking to take and end up seeing what he has to do for cuts, because he knows you can't do this year after year. It's too painful.
Mr.
Too
Chairman?
painful. Can we work out of this over a number of years? Yes. The town of Dedham
Mr.
ended up
Chairman?
having a financial policy. They were in just as much trouble years ago as what we are. And if I go back and I just remind you that they worked themselves from a low bond rating to a AAA. They get the best bond rating now. They have got mitigations. They work as a community, and they're in good financial condition. It took them 10 years.
Mr. Chairman, I think at this point, we should probably take all of this information under advisement, and as a board, we should probably have an agenda item on for next Monday to discuss how we're going to deal with FY14 and FY15.
Already written in.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I thank the board for seeing that, and I'm hoping that our recommendations help push that towards that decision, because it really, the longer we didn't make that decision, the more painful this is going to end up being, and as you said, closing down is not good. We may end up having to do a little bit of free cash and cuts for 2 years, and then we start on the upward. As long as select boards in the future and town administrator end up abiding by the actual budget process, I think we as a community can end up looking ahead to good days. And as my last comment here, I would like to take and end up recognizing our town coordinators. If you do have a meeting next week, I want to take and end up from my perspective of saying it's been a pleasure working with him. We have had some great conversations. He and I have always been on the same page. There's not too many times that we haven't, because he understood what town business is all about. And coming from a business background, we pretty well agreed all the time. I probably took too much of his time over this last year, trying to get this perspective of what the community was all about and what I needed to do as advisory board chairman. When I take the job, I try to end up doing the best I can. So I'd like to take and thank him.
Thank you. All right, thank you. All right, the last thing on the agenda is comments from the select board. Does any selectmen have? Julie, do you have anything?
I'd like to just ask if we can have an agenda item on for Monday to ask Senator Brewer and Representative Andrews to write a letter of support to urge the Inspector General to conduct the investigation. And that the community development meetings will be taking place tomorrow at 1 and at 6 in this conference room. That's to determine, I think, the strategic plan for the grants, the community opportunity grant proposal.
Yes, on your agenda item.
Thank you.
Is that it? Doug?
Really, the thing I would like to say is, even though Will inundates us with a lot of paperwork and a lot of things to read, I do appreciate the time and effort that Will and the other advisory board members put into doing the research, providing us information, and making good recommendations. It makes, at least from my perspective, it makes it easier to have more information to help determine, decisions. So I appreciate, the work that these guys do, as well as the work that Jeff's done for us. He's, as Will stated, he's done a lot of good things and brought forth a lot of good ideas as well.
All right, Ken, you have anything? No. All righty. First of all, I enjoy the reading material for 3 a.m. because I'm always looking for stuff.
Just in one comment, please don't use that if you go to the outhouse.
I sit in front of my computer and I look for stuff to read. My comment would be, and I know it's kind of, it was a hot topic and it seemed like people were wanting to know, because it seemed like they were looking for a place to point blame or point fingers or this or that. And I think the board meeting on the 13th and probably continued on the 16th, I was hesitant to do that because we have a problem, we have an issue, we have something to solve. I think it's more important to find the solutions to the problem and fix it and ensure it does not happen in the future. But I also understand people you know, they want to know, and I think, as I've stated a few times during the past 2.5 years or whatever, that the openness and transparency of the board and the more business they do here in the open leads to credibility and trust, which is probably still lacking for good reason. I also believe that when you're upfront and honest and you admit errors, mistakes, you gain trust. And I stated at one meeting that, and I don't like to go here, and I don't use it as an excuse, but I stated that if people wanted to point a finger or needed someone to blame, they could blame me as sitting chairman of the Board of Selectmen, even though at the time of this budget, I was not even in the country, never mind the state. Having said that, I spoke with the town accountant, and I asked the question of how and when this $505,000 shortage was, discovered, and how it possibly could have happened. It was discovered when they began the recap sheet process in like mid-November. Yes, it's supposed to be done by September, but with the override, the budget question for the school assessment, and that not happening till October 23rd. And a couple of weeks that it was to vote on town hours and spread that money out. That was a process that they really couldn't begin until after town meeting. And that's when it was found out, the shortage. And when it was found, they went, the accountant and the forensic accountant went back and they, double checked to make sure that what they found was correct. So, they didn't want to present something and then find out, oops, it's not as much, or that was not an exact figure. I asked them, well, how, what was the cause? And I was told that in making the budget projections for 2014, that one item such as the ambulance receipts account was counted under revenues to the town, but it was not correspondingly listed under expenses, which essentially cancels it out. So it looked like the town had, I think, $160,000 more than it actually had. Another item was the retirement amount. The amount that the town needed to have to pay was the county retirement, was under what actually was needed. The town debt was the same thing. Local receipts, it actually aired on the plus side. If that wouldn't have been so, it was underestimated. If it would have been the other way, the deficit would have been bigger. That was a $500-something thousand plus. And just do the math and you can see how big the hole really could have been. So that's how, that's the why, or how this shortage ended up. That is why it was so late in the year, in the middle of the fiscal year. I personally knew about it about 4 days before the December 13th meeting. I was still trying to wrap my head around how that could happen, considering the process, the town meeting vote, the department heads. That was reiterated that department heads know what's going on in their budgets, they know their account numbers and this and that. Well, okay, if that is so, how come they could not look at the numbers and equate them? So this just goes to show that stuff happens. A mistake was made, and I think more importantly, it's how we fix it and put things in process. And I believe the advisory board is working in assisting to make sure that happens. So this does not happen again and makes it very difficult for it to happen again. And there are a lot of things we can revisit and go back and forth on and da-da-da, but again, I don't think that serves the process. I'm just letting you know that that is where that happened, and that is when it was found and why it was found so late. It's hard to do your sheet and try to set a tax rate when you're not sure what your expenses, because if the override didn't happen, then it would have just been budget cuts to get that 551,000, and the 60,000 would have been not even on the table. So we have to wait until that happened. Again, as I've said, in this process, the board determines things and votes on stuff. It takes time because it is ruled by committee. It's not one person. You know, one person or city council, for example, does things way different. There's not a town meeting. They make the calls and they pay for it at election time, more so than selectmen or any of the elected people do. So if anyone out there in TV land or otherwise really had the need to know, that is the basics of how it happened, and why it was, and when it was discovered, and why it was so late. It was not, and I will speak for myself, it was not I was trying to hide anything, cover up anything. As was suggested in the newspaper, the town coordinator was keeping this quiet because, you know, it would affect, you know, looking for a job. Not sure when that process started. I don't really care because it doesn't really matter. But this was found in the middle of November, and again, they went and checked and double checked, and because you bring something forward like this, you want to be correct and you want to be dead on. And I don't think that's a bad thing, and I don't think you should criticize the accountant for that. And that's my comment for tonight, and I just wanted to make sure that that got out there just in case. That is a hot button issue for anyone out there. That is the how and the why, and the next thing is how do we go about to fix it? We were given three options basically on that December 13th. An override to cover the whole thing, use free cash and stabilization. One more time, after 10 years plus, might be the quickest, cleanest, easiest way to do it, and then move forward. Just promise never to do it again, and do whatever it takes to get a budget as close to what the revenues of the town, the money we have to spend, we spend, and that's it. And moving forward, we work to try to build stabilization and build free cash, in stabilization and capital stabilization. Because as Mr. Spring noted, that if you go back in town reports and budgets, you can see the town used to have $1 million, a little more, a little less in free cash, in savings, which affects a lot of things. And if we had that amount here right now, we'd just go to a special town meeting and say, hey, we're gonna take 500 grand out of here, pay this shortage, and done. So, that is my comment, and I hope if anyone wanted to know, now they know. As I said, just pointing at who does not solve the problem. But